All right, welcome to episode 6 of the JP Pod. Let's get right into it. President Biden apparently called President Xi Jingping of China today. The timing of this is really interesting considering what I talked about last episode and the report that China possibly was involved in the cargo ship accident in Baltimore. They claim to be improving relations was the purpose of this call, and Xi responded publicly saying that, well, not Xi himself, a China foreign minister claimed that the U.S. has been waging a trade war that is, quote, bewildering and unfathomable. The timing seems to be possibly related to China's potential involvement in the Baltimore bridge incident. I mean, why else would they be doing something like this now? It seems more like a de-escalation attempt more than anything, like two countries having a conflict with one another and kind of de-escalating. The timing just seems really interesting to me. You have to read between the lines when you have an administration like this who continues to lie and hide information from its citizens. If they aren't going to be open and honest about they haven't said much about the Baltimore bridge incident except initially saying that there was no terrorist involvement or anything. They've just kind of moved on from it, haven't said anything about it. When something very random and weird like a cargo ship conveniently losing its power and driving right into a bridge at such an important port like that one that affects everyone globally, and then you're just kind of going to move on from it. It seems kind of odd. And then at the same time, having this call with China to improve relations, the timing of it all just seems kind of weird and seems related to potentially China being involved in the cargo ship incident, and maybe the United States is figuring this out and connecting the dots here and trying to stop this from happening again. Secretary of State Blinken and the Secretary of the Treasury Yellen will be making a trip to China in the coming weeks. Notice we're showing fear with China instead of strength. I'm not saying that we should launch a war with China. I'm actually saying the opposite. I'm saying if we could be strong against China in the first place and show strength, maybe this stuff wouldn't happen in the first place, like the bridge incident in Baltimore, if China was indeed involved, which I'm starting to think they were, considering all of the factors of what's going on right now, like this de-escalation trip, along with the report that they were possibly involved using the remote towing technology, a cyber attack on the cargo ship. If you remember the last trip that Blinken took to China, there was a picture of him shaking hands with President Xi Jingping, and he literally looked like castrated, like next to him. He was slouched over. He looked terrified. Meanwhile, you have Xi Jinping standing tall and strong and firm, and I guarantee you that picture was used propaganda-wise in China to show, like, look, the United States is scared of us. I mean, stuff like that you have to show strength, and instead of going to China and say, oh, please don't do that again. We're sorry, don't do that again. How about you show strength in the first place to where stuff like their cyber attacks, not just the Baltimore incident. I talked last episode, there have been weird instances of F-16s crashing while training, and there's been cyber attacks on our infrastructure like power plants and such. And the United States has openly said that China has been using cyber attacks to test this ability on us and on our systems. So how about you show strength in the first place to where that doesn't happen, and they don't feel inclined to do that, knowing that we won't do anything about it. And our response is going to be going to China, bowing down to Xi Jinping, saying, we're sorry, please don't do this again. We're sorry, whatever we did, we apologize, we'll stop. That's not going to work. It's not going to stop. It's not going to work with an authoritarian government like China and the CCP. You have to show strength. These are not, there's room for negotiations, obviously, but in terms of sending a message, diplomatically, you have to show strength. You can't show weakness and that you're going to allow them to do this stuff and not respond with strength. You have to show strength in the first place to where they don't feel inclined to do this stuff. They know that we'll respond and take action to where they don't feel inclined to do it again. Once we start showing strength instead of weakness, relations will improve with China. And not just China, with Russia and all of our enemies. Instead of showing weakness and fighting them through proxies like we're doing to Russia via Ukraine shows strength. And if you notice, we didn't have these issues with Trump in office because he showed strength instead of Biden, who can't even get through a speech without bumbling and stuttering and doesn't know what he did yesterday. Elections like that matter because now we're portraying to the world that we're weak and we won't do anything if you cyber attack us, and we're going to let you keep doing it. And then eventually we're going to come and have a meaningless trip. I guarantee it won't do jack. They're going to see right through the facade. I mean, we're going to show weakness with this trip. It's not going to accomplish anything. So once we start showing strength, then relations with countries will improve, like China. They won't do it in the first place. I'm not saying we should send missiles in response to that. We have to do something that is equal to what they did, not cyber attacking them per se, but responding in a way that sends a message that without doing something over the top that also shows them like, look, we're not going to tolerate this if you keep doing this. And then that stuff like that will stop. And if we showed strength in the first place, maybe this stuff wouldn't happen. So this little trip that Secretary Blinken and Secretary of Treasury Yellen are going to take, I don't think it's going to really accomplish much. Then this little call between Biden and Xi Jingping, I don't know what. I just don't think. I think it's more of a show, and I don't know, an improving relations trip, and then going back and nothing changing. I don't know. I don't see it doing much. But again, like I said, the timing of this trip and this call makes you wonder if they are catching on to the fact that China was behind this bridge incident in the cargo ship, potentially cyber attacking the cargo ship and having it wreck that bridge. And this could be sort of a de-escalatory move from the Biden administration to China to try to get them to stop. I don't agree with the method that they're doing it. It's a weak move, in my opinion. But maybe they're perhaps catching on to connecting the dots, and they're not going to say that to the public. They're hiding information from us. If that happened in like China or Russia, I mean, look what happened in Russia. Russia's claiming that we were behind the terrorist attacks and that they have info or evidence proving it. Obviously, they're not going to provide that evidence publicly, but at least they're saying to their citizens, look, these people were behind this attack. Now, you can say whether you believe Russia or not, or if it's propaganda, but they're being open with their citizens and saying, like, look, this was a terrorist attack from an enemy from another country, and the Biden administration, if they do know that China was behind this, they're not going to tell us, because then they're going to show that to its own people that we're weak enough that we're being attacked by another country. And the fact that they're not being open and honest with us is a problem. And so that's why you have to read between the lines of what they're doing. And does that back up the fact that they potentially know that China was behind this? I think so. I think it's all adding up that China was behind this. And what we're going to do to respond, I believe, will accomplish nothing, because we're going to respond with weakness instead of strength. But we'll see. I mean, it's very interesting how we're at a point where we can't trust the government to provide all the information to the citizens, and we have to sort of indirectly read between the lines of their moves to make up our own minds on stuff. It's really sad that we're at that point as a nation, and that we can't trust our own government, our own president, to provide us information and be open and honest with us. But that's where we are, unfortunately, as a country. I wanted to also talk about Israel's assassination of the IRGC leader. Looks to be potentially sparking escalation, like I talked about last episode. It potentially could, along with the ending of Ramadan. Iran issued a statement saying that Iranians being attacked are a red line for them, and this could possibly lead to an escalation from Hezbollah instead of Iran directly. I mean, why would Iran directly get involved when they can just use its proxies like Hezbollah and Hamas? But Hezbollah is a very formidable opponent against Israel. Iran is much bigger and stronger than Israel. Hezbollah could also defeat Israel. I don't know. Obviously, this is not including the potential backing from the U.S. with Israel in a war against Hezbollah, but simply head-to-head between them, it's pretty even. it's a pretty even fight, and Hezbollah could potentially win that fight. But also, I mean, obviously Israel could too, but it's about 50-50, I would say, between them. So why would Iran get involved directly with Israel, waste that money and killing of its soldiers when they could just use its proxy, Hezbollah, which is right on Israel's border? So potentially this could start a war between Hezbollah and Iran. This could be Iran's response, giving Hezbollah the green light to start a full-fledged war. I mean, they've been technically at war since October 7th, but not really a full-fledged war. It's just kind of been throwing missiles back and forth, just backing each other off the border a little bit. But Israel has been building up massive supplies, actually, for a full-out war with Hezbollah. Reports say over $500 million has been invested in boosting stockpiles in Israel. It appears that Israel's officials and government are expecting an inevitable war with Hezbollah, and reports and experts have also been... The experts believe that it's only a matter of time before a full-fledged war with Hezbollah and Israel begins. But this assassination of the IRGC leader in Damascus, it could start that. Iran's already said that they will take decisive action, and them, along with Hezbollah, are saying cryptic messages. I mean, they've always done that. But in response to this, I mean, I wouldn't be surprised if this was the spark that starts a full-fledged war between Israel and Hezbollah. Like I said, it's unlikely Iran will directly get involved and strike Israel because they don't really need to. They have Hezbollah, which is a pretty equal opponent to Israel. And, but who knows? Iran could fight Israel along with Hezbollah, and then they could just, in their own minds, look, this is our chance. We can get rid of Israel if we do this together. I think that's unlikely, because I think Iran knows that if they get directly involved, then the United States will get directly involved with Iran, and it will be starting a war with the United States. I mean, the second Iran launches against Israel directly, they're starting a direct war with the United States. So they know that. They're not going to do that. I think they would use their proxy of Hezbollah instead. Hezbollah and Israel have had wars before. I can't remember the exact year, but it was early 2000s was the last war. I think it lasted about 6 months. Nobody really wants a war with Hezbollah in Israel because obviously it costs a lot of money, a lot of dead soldiers and dead citizens. But I think they understand that this is inevitable. This is going to happen eventually. That's why they've been investing over $500 million and boosting its stockpiles. So I believe everybody thinks that this war is going to happen eventually between Hezbollah and Israel. The only question was what was going to spark that, and it looks like this assassination could spark that. This timing up with the ending of Ramadan, like I mentioned last episode, could potentially be the perfect storm, per se, to start this conflict between them. And Hamas has been greatly destabilized. They've been greatly hit from Israel during this war. I mean, they're pretty much at the bottom and would have to... I mean, Israel would like to wipe them out completely, but, I mean, they're at a point it would take them a long time to rebuild, to strike Israel again. So I don't think Israel will be against moving to Hezbollah if they have to. Israel wouldn't fire the first strike. It would be Hezbollah, and it would happen unexpectedly, is what the experts are claiming, that this war would be something that would kind of happen out of the blue. But this kind of wouldn't be out of the blue. This would kind of be in response to the assassination. So that assassination timing up with the ending of Ramadan next week, this could be the start of a Hezbollah war with Israel. I don't know how much the U.S. would back. I think the U.S. would back them budget, like they would send them money and stuff to replace its Iron Dome, which will be in full effect, obviously protecting its citizens from Hezbollah missiles. But I do not think it would reach the same level as they're doing in Ukraine. Israel would need much bigger help from the United States than what it got for fighting Hamas. Hamas is a much lower level opponent than Hezbollah. Hezbollah is one of the strongest terrorist organizations in the Middle East. But it'll be interesting to see how much the United States does back up Israel. I think Israel could last a good period of time without much help from the United States. But if it starts to look bad, and like I said, it's about 50-50, I would say. Maybe like 55-45 Israel maybe to get the edge, but it's pretty equal between them and Hezbollah. So if the tides start to turn towards Hezbollah's way, I mean, Hezbollah is going to have full backing from Iran. Obviously, it's its proxy, but it'll be interesting to see, will the United States help Israel if the tides do turn and it's not looking good for Israel in a war against Hezbollah. It'll be interesting to see how much they help them, because the United States like to say that they're an ally and that we'll help them to do whatever it takes to survive as a nation. But it appears we've been backing away from that, and we've got our own president and Netanyahu going head to head. So if this war does start soon, how much will the United States back Israel in that war? I saw yesterday that the United States and Israel came together and collaborated and made an agreement for Israel to go into Rafah, thankfully. So that may be a positive sign that the two sides are starting to work more together instead of against each other. But like I said, it'll be interesting to see if Israel needs the United States help in this war against Hezbollah. Will the United States provide that help? So we'll see what happens. The Middle East tensions appear to be rising again. You know, when October 7th happened and the war in Gaza began, tensions in the Middle East were like something I've never seen. Obviously, I haven't lived long enough to see past instances like the previous Hezbollah-Israel war, the Yom Kippur war. So obviously, I haven't been alive to see it, but I mean, it was unbelievable to see how high the tensions were after October 7th. They eventually kind of cooled down, but they've kind of stayed at a certain level with the potential to rise back up again. And it looks like it's kind of starting to creep back up again. Like I said, the ending of Ramadan is coming up. This assassination, this was the first time Israel has taken out a direct member of the Iranian military. So this is kind of a big deal. This may be the biggest move from Israel since the beginning of the war against Hamas. I mean, this was not a Hamas leader. This was an Iranian leader. So who knows? This may be a red line that Israel just crossed, to where Iran allows Hezbollah to start a full-fledged war with Israel, or Iran itself. I don't think that's likely, but it's possible. So the tensions in the Middle East are starting to rise again. And like I said last episode, experts believe the ending of Ramadan could start a new escalation from other countries. And it looks like this assassination from Israel of an Iranian leader, it could spark that escalation. God forbid. We need to pray that doesn't happen, and I hope it doesn't happen, but it looks like it's starting to head that direction again. And Iran says that Israel just crossed a red line for them, so who knows? Maybe the inevitable war between Hezbollah and Israel is here. So we'll see what happens with that. There was a clip, RFK Jr. was on CNN, I believe it was yesterday, maybe 2 days ago. This is a really good clip. CNN asked RFK about Trump being a threat to democracy and tried to get a clip validating CNN's own claims of Trump being a threat to democracy, but he actually gave them the opposite. He claimed that Biden is a much larger threat to democracy than Trump, saying he's the first president to use federal agencies to censor political speech. So, you know, that they tried to bait him into, it appears the left is trying to, they see RFK Jr. as a threat to them, and RFK Jr. is more of a threat to Biden than he is to Trump, I believe. I believe Trump's supporters will support him no matter what. He's got a very loyal group, and the middle ground, or the moderate part of the Republican Party, is much smaller than the moderate part of the Democratic Party. The Democratic Party is going so far to the left, it's losing its moderate group, and the moderate group of the Democrat Party is much larger than the Republican Party. And especially with this administration, this is the most radical and woke administration we've ever had. I mean, not even the woke part of it. When have you had an administration go so far to the extreme of its political party than this administration? So the middle ground is much larger on the Democratic side than the Republican side. So somebody like RFK Jr. is a much bigger threat to Biden than he is to Trump. So it appears that, the left and organizations like CNN are trying to pull RFK more to its side than Trump's side and trying to bait him to say things and get clips of him like this, but it backfired on them. And he's right. I mean, the threat to democracy is lawfare, censorship, and constant division, which is what you get from the left. And I'm not saying Trump is a uniter by any means, but Biden's inaugural speech, he claimed that he would unite everyone, even the people that didn't vote for him. And instead, he's launched a war against the MAGA Republicans and has been nothing but a divider. He's not a uniter, he's a divider. And like I said, I'm not saying Trump is the perfect uniter either, but Biden is such a divisive president. I mean, his war on the MAGA Republicans, all he's doing is going further to the left. He's not coming to the middle and uniting both Republicans and Democrats like we need. He's going so far extreme to the left, he's waging a war against the Republican Party. Lying, gaslighting, and hiding information from its own citizens is a threat to democracy. I talked about this earlier in the episode. The not providing of information to its citizens if China was directly involved in the Baltimore ship accident, which is starting to act like they know that they were, that is a threat to democracy. Not providing the full information to its citizens and hiding information suppression, that is a threat to democracy. Not allowing free and fair elections is a threat to democracy. And I'm not even talking about specifically any suspicious widespread fraud within the voting in 2020, but the suppression of information in terms of elections. That's election interference. That's a threat to democracy. You have places like Google hiding information on Trump and only promoting false hit pieces on him during times of an election. That's election interference. And you have big tech bowing down to the left and doing whatever the left tells them to do. That's propaganda. You have organizations like Google and who they control the information essentially. Nobody goes to, the library or books anymore. Google is the main source of information for everybody around the world, but especially here in the United States. So when you weaponize Google to suppress information and promote information you want promoted, that's election interference. So I'm not even talking about the suspicious voter fraud that went on in 2020, although there was a substantial amount of that. Maybe not widespread enough to claim it wasn't a fair election. I mean, there was isolated incidents of voter fraud. But I'm just talking about the suppression of information. One of the key components of a republic and a democracy is the access to information. Not allowing certain information that you don't want allowed because it doesn't further your agenda and hurts your agenda. You're no longer a democracy. You're trending towards an authoritarian government. And that's what the left has been doing for years. I mean, it really took off during the 2016 election, and it even ramped up even more during 2020, not only with the election, but with COVID. So that is a key sign of a threat to democracy. You don't see Trump, I mean, he doesn't have the power to do so, but you don't see him, suppressing information on Biden. Obviously, like I said, the big tech organizations like Google lean more towards the left, but you don't see Trump trying to suppress information on Biden. He wants information on Biden because he trusts his voters and the American people to make up their own minds and see what Biden's screw-ups are. Suppression of information is, like I said, a key component to seeing a fall of a democracy and trending towards something that is not democratic. Trying to keep your opponents off of the ballot based off technicalities with the law, that is a threat to democracy. The whole insurrection technicality that they're trying to use against Trump, even though he didn't incite an insurrection, January 6th was not trying to overthrow a government. And I'm not going to go down the rabbit hole today about all the FBI agents in the field on January 6th. I will eventually, not right now, but that the using technicalities within the law, trying to keep your political opponent off of the ballot, that is a threat to democracy. That's not allowing a free and fair election. If you think that there was an insurrection and that Trump is a threat to democracy because he tried to overthrow the government, trust the voters to make up their minds on that. What you're doing is you're not trusting the voters to be able to make up their own minds, use common sense. You're telling them what to think, and you're telling them that you're imposing fact. You're saying this is a fact that this happened. I'm not going to let you make up your own mind on it. Just trust me. He did this, so he shouldn't be on the ballot. And thank God the Supreme Court ruled against that. But you also have Biden threatening the Supreme Court. He did it in the State of the Union address. He threatened the Supreme Court based off their overturning of Roe v. Wade. But I guarantee you it wasn't just because of that. It was because of their ruling in the Colorado ballot case. They voted for allowing Trump on the ballot. And I guarantee you that was not just for Roe v. Wade. But how insane is that? We have checks and balances for a reason. And when you have a president openly to their face on TV threatening the Supreme Court justices, that is crazy. You want to talk about a threat to democracy? That's a threat to democracy. That is an authoritarian leader. That is somebody who is threatening another part of the government. Like I said, we have checks and balances for a reason. We have Congress and the Supreme Court to hold the president in check, right? So when you have the president wanting to go rogue and threaten those people, that is, I don't know what a bigger threat to democracy is. That is a large threat to democracy. The State of the Union address, not only that aspect of it, but it was a glorified political campaign rally. That is a threat to democracy. When has the State of the Union ever been to further political motives? When has it ever become a glorified rally for that president? It'll be bigger than any rally he's had outside of that. So maybe he was using that. I don't know. But if you look back, if you were to tell presidents like Ronald Reagan or any former president, George Washington, Abraham Lincoln, you told any of them that the State of the Union address would turn into that, they would be disgusted. And rightfully so. The State of the Union is to unite the nation, to come to the U.S. citizens, the ones who are for you, who voted for you, the ones who are against you and didn't vote for you, to unite them and tell them the truth about how the State of the Union is. Instead, we got lies. Instead, we got political agendas. We got propaganda because he didn't talk about the record high inflation. He didn't talk about, he started off the speech talking about a war against another country that we're not directly involved in. Although we are, because our own president started the State of the Union talking about it, but we don't have our own men fighting Russia. Why should we start our own? This is a state of our union. This is not the state of Ukrainians' union. This is a state of our union. Why are we talking about Ukraine? This is supposed to unite the American people and tell them truthfully how the State of the Union is. And we don't provide information. That's the good and the bad. You don't provide information on what's going wrong in our country and how the plan to fix it, while also talking about what's going right in our own country. He barely even talked about our own country. When he did talk about our own country, he talked about the Supreme Court overturning Roe v. Wade and then threatening them. So he didn't talk about the State of the Union. It was a glorified political campaign speech. That is a threat to democracy. Now, obviously, Trump is not perfect, and yes, he made an attempt to get Mike Pence to somehow keep him in office. But our guardrails as a democracy, in place as a government, they keep those things from happening. Trump promoted global peace, strong borders, and a fantastic economy, and the filter is our guardrails. Obviously, Trump is a narcissist, and Trump is, he's going to do things like he did in 2020 when he believes there was widespread voter fraud to keep him in office. But our guardrails as a democracy is a filter. You filter from the good from the bad. You can get the good parts of Trump, like the global peace, strong borders, the fantastic economy, record job growth. And no, Biden can't claim that when he gets it after COVID. All the jobs that were gone from COVID. Oh, all of a sudden they're back. COVID's over and I can claim the job growth. No, Trump had record job growth besides COVID. So when you can get all the good stuff from Trump, And the guardrails are the filter between the bad stuff when his narcissistic traits come and he tries to, keep himself empowered. Those guardrails are in place for that. So who's trying to get rid of those guardrails? Biden. Who's trying to get rid of our democracy and our checks and balances? Biden. Who's using lawfare to keep his political opponents off of the ballot? Biden. Biden is trying to get rid of the guardrails of a democracy. The bigger threat of someone staying in power and getting rid of the guardrails and stuff that keeps him from doing that, the bigger threat of someone trying to stay in power illegally is Biden and not Trump. You want to know why? Because Trump hasn't made an effort to get rid of those guardrails. He fell victim to it. Biden right now is effectively trying to get rid of that stuff to keep Trump from running again. So, like I said, constant lawfare, election interference, and threatening the Supreme Court, there's many more, but those alone show who the biggest threat to democracy is, and it's not Trump. Biden and his administration is the greatest threat to democracy that this country has ever seen. We've never seen an administration go at the foundations of our democracy for its own gain like this administration has. They're focused more on trying to figure out a way to keep Trump off the ballot than stuff going on within our own country. They're more focused on that than the record high illegal immigration, the terrorists pouring through our border, the record high inflation, the constant wars that we're involved in. The world is on fire since Biden has been in office. It wasn't that way during Trump. There was peace during Trump. Look at the Abrahamic Accords. We're about to have we've never seen peace like that in the Middle East. And Trump helped get those deals done. And instead, Biden comes into office and we have full-fledged war in the Middle East. So like I said, Trump's not perfect, but the guardrails that are that filter for him, on the other hand, Biden is trying to get rid of those guardrails for his own gain and to keep people from running against him. That is the threat to democracy. The side that is trying to keep a political opponent off the ballot is the threat to democracy. They claim that conflicts like the war in Ukraine are a, quote, fight for democracy, and that we're such a beacon for democracy globally that we have to protect a democratic country like Ukraine, although Ukraine's more of an oligarchy than a democracy. They're the most corrupt democracy. Look what's going on right there. They're using the war as a reason to not have elections, even though you look at the United States had elections during the Civil War, World War II, right? And we're the beacon of democracy. We had those elections during those times. You're not having an election? Zelensky is turning into an authoritarian over there. So claiming that we're fighting for a democracy like Ukraine is funny to start with. They're the most corrupt democracy on earth, although we're giving them a run for our money right now. But anyways, when we claim that we're supporting Ukraine as a fight for democracy against an authoritarian country like Russia, shoot, what's going on here in the U.S. is not much better than what's going on in Russia. We're throwing our political opponents in jail, or trying to. And look what we did to the innocent members of January 6th, the ones who didn't go and, I'm not going to go down that rabbit hole right now, but I will some other time. But what's going on here is not much better than what's going on in Russia in terms of lawfare, throwing our political opponents in jail. Obviously, it's not to the point to where people like me who oppose the government can't speak openly about it. I don't have to worry about getting thrown in jail. Although everyone has to worry about the CIA and NSA spying on you. And look what they're doing to Julian Assange. Julian Assange is a great example of it. Everybody has to talk about Alexei Navalny. Look at what's going on with Julian Assange. And our shadow government is keeping him in jail because he openly exposed what they're doing illegally. You want to talk about democracy? That's not a democracy. Throwing people in jail because they oppose you, that's not a democracy. That is going towards authoritarian dictatorships, right? So Trump is not the threat to democracy. Biden is the threat to democracy. You don't see Trump trying to keep Biden off the ballot. And I guarantee you, if Trump wins and Biden's going to run against him again, I guarantee you we'll get round 3 in that case if that happens, if Trump wins. You won't see Trump trying to keep Biden off the ballot. He wants a full, fair election. And although, like I said, he went off the rails a little bit, our Democratic guardrails kept him from doing that. Those are the same guardrails that Biden's trying to get rid of for his own gain. So you can make up your own mind. Who's the bigger threat to democracy, right? The side that's promoted constant lawfare to try to keep Trump off the ballot, off of ridiculous claims. I mean, look at the fraud case in New York. It's ridiculous. They're trying to bankrupt him. And, it's pretty easy. If you look at it through common sense, not listening to what the mainstream media outlets, especially the ones that lean towards the left and what they're telling you and what the Biden administration is telling you, then you'll see clearly who the bigger threat to democracy is. It's not Trump, it's Biden. And we've never seen a more polarizing figure and divisive figure than Biden. Because Trump was divisive, but that's because of his... he did his own part in that, but he didn't have a full-fledged war with his non-voters like Biden has. Biden has openly started a war with the MAGA Republicans. They've started their own, it's like a slur. They coined their own like slur for Republicans, calling them MAGA Republicans. That's what they do. That's part of the propaganda. So now whenever you hear MAGA, God forbid we want to make America great again, they've turned that into a coined negative term that they use on people that don't agree with their political beliefs. I mean, that's propaganda. Coining phrases like that for your own gain, you're brainwashing people. So you tell me who the bigger threat to democracy is. It's not Trump. I guarantee you that. Watch the State of the Union address, and that'll tell you all you need to know about who the bigger threat to democracy is. It will send chills down your spine that we have this guy as our leader, and he's having propaganda-like speeches in the State of the Union. It's scary. And, if Biden gets elected again, we're going to go down a path. Democracy will look a lot different. And some people may not even call it democracy anymore. We're on the cliff of that right now. And if we don't change course, then it's not going to be a democracy anymore. It's going to become something much darker and much different. So, I don't know. You tell me who you think the bigger threat to democracy is. And I guarantee you look at what's happening and what's taking place against Trump with the constant lawfare and the efforts to keep him off the ballot. And that should tell you all you need to know about who the biggest threat to democracy is. All right. That is all the topics for today. I'll be back here tomorrow for another episode. I'll see you guys tomorrow.